Biztech's inaugural ESG Conversation Show. Our guest for today is Dr. Yatela Zainal Abidin. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Yayasan Sime Darby. Yayasan Sime Darby, or Sime Darby Foundation, is the philanthropic arm of 3 Sime Darby companies, which are large listed companies in Malaysia. The foundation's mission is to lead and make a sustainable impact and difference in the lives of others. Now, it is dedicated to enhancing the lives and delivering sustainable value through 5 pillars, which is education, environment, community and health, and sports, as well as arts and culture. Now, to tell us more about Sime Darby Foundation and its ESG initiatives, welcome to the show, Dr. Yatela.
Thank you, Brian. I'm honored to be here today.
Go ahead, Dr. Yatela.
All right. Okay. So, Sime Darby Foundation, Yayasan Sime Darby, we are, as you said, the philanthropic arm. We carry out the CSR initiatives for 3 Sime Darby companies, and they are Sime Darby Plantation Berhad, Sime Darby Property Berhad, and Sime Darby Berhad. They all have different industries, and we help them carry out all the work under ESG. Actually, they themselves have their own ESG initiatives in order to be more sustainable, for financial resilience, as well as to be more ethically responsible. And on top of all that, what they do in their operations, they donate big sums of their profits to us in order for us to carry out all the good work under our 5 pillars. Now, you see the icons this side of me. They represent the 5 pillars. Education, we do so much for scholarships, as well as education development work with schools. We focus on the underprivileged. And the environment, there's just so much that we do for the environment. I can go into it later. Community and health, sports, as well as arts and culture. And now, everything that we do is ESG. Actually, the term of ESG, I like to say, we've been doing it for so long. It's a term that's coined just recently, some years ago, but we've been doing all the work of ESG for so long. Now, environment as well as education, we focus so much on being the steward for environment conservation for our 3 donors. And then social responsibility, we carry out in community and health, sports, arts and culture. And governance, if you look at our mission, as you just mentioned just now, we practice high ethical values and good corporate governance. And in the philanthropic industry in Malaysia, I think we stand out. We are the lead in governance. And so ESG is within our DNA. It is what we are about all these years of operating. We are 41 years old this year.
And so here's the interesting thing, Dr. Yatela, to echo what you've just said. Our research has just shown that essentially, yes, you've been essentially ahead of the curve in looking at ESG before the term ESG was coined for the last 40 years, especially in the areas of philanthropy and also preserving the environment. Could we then zoom in this ESG conversation around why is it important for an organization or companies to integrate ESG policies and considerations into their organizational governance structure?
Oh my gosh. Now, in order for them to be sustainable, not only for themselves, but as well as their stakeholders and the world at large, they have to think ESG. And they have to think about how they will need to sustain the environment in order for them to operate as long as they can, and focus on social impact, social on diversity, inclusivity, communities' well-being, as well as for governance, transparency, openness, accountability, effectiveness, all comes under governance. So all this is so important for companies to go ahead and last for a long, long time. And with ESG, in what they do, others will invest in them. It's easy for them to get, employees, people joining them as good employees. And having all this in mind is just for the greater good for everyone. That's why it's important.
So, Dr. Yatela, perhaps we can, out of your 5 pillars, let's, because of this ESG conversation, zoom in on one particular one, the environment. How do you make an impact as a foundation on the environment in a positive manner that basically ticks the boxes and pushes the envelope of the ESG movement across your 3 different parent companies?
Okay, all right. Now, can I just talk a little bit about Malaysia as a country? All the philanthropic corporations, foundations, as well as organizations that have CSR in them, we come together under the umbrella, something called GDRN, GLC Demi Rakyat dan Negara.
Okay.
Where we come together and we work to complement each other and not duplicate what we do towards the greater good of ESG. Yeah. And there are 3 focus areas: jalinan ilmu, jalinan kemanusiaan, and jalinan sejahtera.
Okay, tell us about those 3 initiatives. How does that make an impact?
All right. So ilmu is education. Kemanusiaan is what is this? Humanity. And sejahtera is well-being. Now, what Yayasan Sime Darby, as part of this big group of the whole country looking at this overall for ESG, is for sejahtera only also, under our environment pillar, we look into conservation work on the ground itself, as well as education, importance of education in environment. I tell you, there's just so much that we can do with education and awareness for environment. Now, to start with, Yayasan Sime Darby, we've been planting trees. That's just cliche. Everybody plants trees. But when we plant trees, we ensure the survivability of these trees, making sure that these trees live and to be the carbon sinks, to be combating greenhouse gas emissions. That's one thing that we do. Another thing that we do is biodiversity conservation. And how we do this is we choose specific animal species and we carry out conservation work for these species. And when you do these kinds of conservation work, indirectly other species can gain. For example, now we work with Sabah Forestry Department. Sabah is a state in Malaysia, reforesting 5,400 hectares of highly degraded forests for 10 years in a space that is full of orangutans, right? Okay. So we're looking at orangutans, rehabilitation of their habitats. And because this area, the orangutans cannot move because they're kind of caught in that area because of this river, and orangutans cannot swim, right? So they have to live in this area. And when I went there more than 10 years ago, 2010, it was just shrubs. And after 10 years of slogging, it was not easy to plant trees. Today, when you go there, I go there, you see trees with orangutan nests in them, and you can see life coming back to the forest. So all the animal species within there also come back while we are saving the orangutans, while with planting trees, you see. And that is what we do in conservation. Another thing is that we also focus on giving out scholarships for researchers in conservation. Now, for example, give you an example, we have been doing this project with Nottingham University, Malaysia, right? Human-elephant conflict management, coexisting with elephants, right? So we've been supporting all these years about 13 researchers, postgraduate studies, masters and PhDs, in order for us to come up with things that we can do actions on the ground. For example, policies for plantation companies on how to deal with human-elephant conflict so that we can conserve the elephants. So we start off with research, carry out the work with the communities, and now we even have a coalition of oil palm growers coming together to conserve the elephants with policies built into their organizations. And that's such a good example of ESGs within organizations. That's for work on the ground. Putting boots on the ground as well. Patrolling, so important to combat poaching of our animal species, our precious tigers, as well as gaharu, very expensive, tree species in the country. So we worked with all kinds of organizations in the States, Sabah as well as Perak, to put boots on the grounds. And also, while we are doing it, work with the indigenous people, giving them knowledge and employ them as rangers, because they are the experts in the forest. They know, they can see, they are our eyes and ears, working with the communities as well, the indigenous communities, because they are the most near the forest, you see. So while we are doing that, we are also giving a sustainable livelihood to the indigenous communities, as well as the poor B40 local communities around these areas. Now, on environment, education, there's just so much. Aside from the research that we've been supporting all these years, that came up with, for example, 3 state action plans for animal conservation, for the proboscis monkey in Sabah, for clouded leopard, as well as bunting in Sabah. Now we're working on hornbill conservation in Sabah, an action plan for the government to implement. We also do things like coming up with documentaries, working with really talented companies to come up with documentaries. For example, if you go to YouTube and you key in Laya Lia, we have 52 short documentaries focusing on our animal species, our heroes in conservation, and even areas where we have lots of biodiversity and conservation work is going on. And what the tagline is for Laya Lia is, bila kenal kita cinta, bila cinta kita lindungi, which means when we are aware about it, we will love it. And when we love it, we will naturally protect it. So that's what we do. So many things under the environment pillar, but that's just a little bit of what we do.
So here's the thing, Dr. Yatela, this is fantastic, because just to summarize all the things that you've done, and just to put it in 2 or 3 key points. One, you obviously have a huge impact in terms of reforestation or rehabilitation of a 5,400 tracts. So that
That's
will
just
be
one.
obviously, that's just one.
Yes.
And you're talking about rehabilitation again of
animal species.
Animal species. Now,
living together and coexisting with them. Yes.
and this is a very important thing, because again, one of your 3 parent companies is a plantation company, a plantation company that is primarily in oil palm cultivation.
Yes.
And this is a message that probably needs to get out into the world outside Malaysia, because people always think negatively in terms of oil palm plantations, and they don't think of the conservation aspects. So it's really good to hear that Sime Darby Foundation is really pushing the agenda in this space.
Yes.
Without people realizing as much, which brings me to my next question. And obviously sustainability is a key part of your DNA as a company and as the 3 companies. But now in the Malaysian agenda, the 12th Malaysia plan, the government has been starting to really push that agenda. Now, how do you think the rest of Malaysian companies are faring in the sustainability scale?
I think we are doing very well, especially the big, large companies like the 3 Sime Darby companies. the government-linked companies, as well as the MNCs, yeah. Now, our country has this net zero by 2050 target that everybody is going towards. You know, three Sime Darby companies have their very detailed strategies of how they are going to assist the country to achieve that objective of net zero.
But Dr. Yatela, so here's the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Companies like Sime Darby probably have very good practices. You were early in the curve.
Yes.
You were way ahead of the curve,
Mm-hmm.
probably close to being regional leaders in the ESG space. But the rest of Malaysia is not.
Yes, the
So,
SMEs, especially the small, medium-sized ones.
Exactly. So what are your thoughts in terms of how the rest of the government wants to promote this? So what does the community at large and the corporate community need to do in order to push the ESG agenda up the level of importance? For most SMEs, as you pointed out, that's not important. It's only important to them if their customer tells them to do something. Yes. But ESG is not only about doing the right thing, it can also be very profitable. Do you have some examples of perhaps how you know of maybe your parent companies have basically in the pursuit of ESG principles and been able to actually make money or save money?
I see. Now, it's all about long-term savings. It's all about long-term making money. And that's what they are doing, putting in the investments today for a sustainable tomorrow. Now, for SMEs, they would need to not be afraid. Smaller companies and companies that are thinking, maybe I don't want to do this because it's just too expensive for me. They should start small. They should start small. Just for example, having a mindset of trying to do as much as they can to save the environment, to reduce waste, for example, to reduce the usage of water, to reduce carbon emission. And with that kind of mindset, the best talent would be, drawn to them, and best talent would come to them, and they would actually have even better opportunities to get more profits in the long term. That's just a very small example of what it can be. But they should start small. They should not think about it's all being about money. Yes, Yayasan Sime Darby or Sime Darby Foundation is about these three big companies donating to us and to do good for the environment, for the society, with a high level of governance, practicing ESG. But others, they should not be thinking that it's just only about money.
And what do you think then, should the government do to promote the basic principles of ESG across the landscape, really not only among the corporate Malaysia, but also among the society as a whole?
Number one, they're already doing tax incentives, right? It's the carrot, dangling carrot. But also the awareness, having important campaigns to open everyone's eyes about how they can gain by implementing ESGs in what they do on a day-to-day basis. That is what the government can be working with us as well in philanthropy to support the country in implementing ESG for the greater good. Now, all this while it's been SDGs, yeah? The 17 SDGs, and now it's ESG. It's all towards the well-being of the world at the end of the day. So the government will need to work together with all organizations that are all their stakeholders, not only philanthropy companies like us, but also the organizations that are actually carrying out businesses to spread the word, for everyone to have knowledge that, for example, climate change is upon us. What we need to do is to minimize our impact so that we can minimize climate effect on us. Also on how we adapt what's happening with all the drought as well as the floods, have mitigations. All this needs to be in place with the knowledge that has to be instilled. Not many people know. especially the B40 communities.
So
And
the
when I say
B40 from a
B40,
Malaysian context is the
bottom
the
40,
bottom 40%.
the poor. Yes. And how, like for example, Yayasan Sime Darby, how we work to spread the knowledge about, for example, climate change. We work in Perak with an NGO called Global Environment Center. They're award winning. They just won the Merdeka Award. And we work with these 2 communities in Perak to plant mangrove, right? Because those areas that we have identified, very high erosion rate, risky already, class or risk class 1 or something like that for erosion. And because of that, you know, floods happen into the community. What do you call it? The forests all are depleted because of, and also the beaches are taken away because of the water that comes because of the erosion. Yeah. So what we do is that we train and give the knowledge to the B40s, these communities, the poor communities, that if you plant these trees, you will be saved from the floods. You can take off, you can get shrimp, you can get crabs, you can get other stuff that you can produce from the mangroves for your sustainability. So they have some sort of an alternative livelihood because they're poor anyways. So now when we go there, because of the knowledge that we give to them, they understand the importance of climate change mitigation actions as well as action by planting these mangrove trees.
Yeah,
So
and of course, there's a direct benefit for them. They see the connection because there's a dollars and cents benefit for them by restoring the environment, in this case, mangroves.
Yes, exactly. And the corporates that are around can see as well when the community is saying, hello, here we have to have you helping us to save our mangrove. You see, so that the message, while we are giving through the government, to the organizations, we can give this awareness to the communities so that they can make those noises to the organizations that are operating around them as well, so that we can take care of our environment together. And that is what is happening in Malaysia right now. We are addressing it from all angles, from the government giving tax incentives, from the awareness to the organizations through philanthropy, as well as to the communities on the ground.
Dr. Yatela, it's been a fascinating conversation. In fact, I've learned a lot, and I just realized how much Sime Darby is doing and making an impact. But before we leave, any final words or thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
Okay, so it's never too late to start. We have to live sustainably, doing those small changes in our lives, right? In our daily lives, as well as where we are attached to, our resident association, our student alumni, our company that we work with. We need to instill the idea that ESG is so important for us to have that future, that bright future for us, for our children, and for our grandchildren after that. Yeah.
Dr. Yatela, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Now, we've been speaking to Dr. Yatela Zainal Abidin, the Chief Executive Officer of Yayasan Sime Darby, or the Sime Darby Foundation, on Biztech's inaugural ESG Conversation show. I'm Brian Fernandez. This interview will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our social media platforms. It'll also be on our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.